Hello everyone, it's Emma and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be continuing in my series of what happens to our waste, and we're going to be talking about our metal recycling. I know that I talk fast. I'm sorry that I do. I really can't help it. I try to consciously talk slower and I just can't. So if I talk too fast for you, there are two things you can do. One, I will leave the script for this video linked down below. You can read along. There's actually a little gear icon down here in this corner of your screen. You can change the speed of this video, whatever might be beneficial for you, because I would love for you to still enjoy my video even though I talk a mile a minute. Sorry. So a couple months ago we explored plastic, which was the creation of this series and what got me interested in where does all of our recycling actually end up. And then after that video, since then, I've also explored glass recycling. So today we're finally going to be diving into metal. The inspiration behind this series also is which materials are most likely recycled, which ones have the highest chance of being recycled, how do we even get our recyclables to be recycled in the first place, and I was also curious as to where it ends up and why so much of it ends up in the ocean. I was asking myself so many questions, and that's what I try to answer for myself with these videos, and in turn give this information to you guys to hopefully answer some of those questions if you have them. First, metal is tricky, especially when it comes to household metals, and that is because we consume a lot of different types of metals within our homes. Things like tin, aluminum, and steel. Those are the most common that we use in our households. So unlike other materials, for example, glass, metals have to go through an extensive sorting process to make sure that they are all being sorted and recycled correctly, because if you try to recycle aluminum and then a piece of tin gets in there, it's going to ruin the whole batch. From here, they are melted down in their own individual smelting pots, one for aluminum, one for tin, one for steel, and so forth. And from there, once they are melted down, they are ready to be turned into new items. Seems easy enough, right? And actually it is. Metal, all types of it, is actually one of the most easily recyclable materials that we consume on a daily basis. And unlike plastic and paper, metal can actually be recycled infinitely. It never loses any quality no matter how much it's recycled. And sure, glass can be recycled infinitely too, like we learned in my last video, but unfortunately that's not always the case for glass because it's very expensive to recycle glass. At the very least, it would take your metal 6 weeks to go from curbside to melting to turn into a new item to actually being put on a shelf. Just 6 weeks. That's how cheap and easy it is to recycle metal, which is great news. Recycling metal not only is done very fast, but it is done with great quality as well. It's not just one of those, let's get it out and let's get it produced really fast, no matter the quality. Metal's quality is always very good. And another thing, steel is actually the most common recycled material in the entire world. In fact, most steel used today is actually recycled steel. The clear benefit to recycling metal, as with recycling a lot of other objects, is that it saves hundreds of millions of dollars every single year, especially with metal, because unfortunately, it's very cheap to get new sand for glass, to get new oil for plastic, to cut down new trees for paper. But with metal, it is very expensive to mine new ore, and it is actually cheaper for once to just recycle what's already been created. And that's a big reason why we see such low recycling rates with plastic, glass, and paper, is because it's cheaper to just make it brand new. So that's the great news about metal, is it's actually cheaper to be recycled, so therefore there's more incentive to recycle it. And of course it also saves a lot of time, energy, and more money than it would be to harvest new materials for just one can of beans or something. This not only is great money-wise, but also for the environment, because we're not wasting resources mining new ore all the time for brand new cans. We're just recycling what's already been created. It saves a lot of energy there for the excavation, for the transport, for turning that ore into metal, and then turning that metal into products. Instead, we just melt down what we already have and turn that into a new product. As always, all sources will be linked down below if you'd like to do your own research. But the moment you've all been waiting for, is 100% of our metal actually recycled? No, of course it's not. Just like with any other material that we've explored in this series, the recycling rate is not that great. For metal, I mean, in the US, when you're comparing metal recycling in the US to any other material recycling in the US, metal is fantastic, but it's still not great compared to what it should be. Just because every type of metal can be recycled easily and cheaply doesn't mean that it is. Currently, only about 30% of metal is recycled. Broken down, it is about 48% of aluminum, 63% of steel, which is pretty good, at least in the US. Though, of the 250 million tons of waste that enters the waste stream in the US, metal only makes up about 8.4%. So far in this series, metal seems to be the best. It is the best cost-wise, it is the best environmental-wise, it is the easiest to recycle, the quickest to recycle. Why is it not more widely recycled though? I ask this question especially because metal's quality never degrades. It can literally be recycled time and time again, and it will be nearly the same as it was when it started out. And it boils down to a few reasons. But number one, of course, like we've explored in my other videos in this series, is contamination. And contamination can be anything from a can of paint, a can of chemicals, even all the way down to just you didn't rinse out your can of black beans. that could literally prevent your can from being recycled. When you don't rinse some of your recycling, all the gunk in there hardens to it and it makes it so much easier to get it off when it gets to the factory. Because factories do try to clean it if possible, but if it's too much work, money, and effort, they're just not gonna do it. And also, when you have a contaminated object, if you just have one can that you didn't rinse out in your entire bag of cans, that entire bag of cans might be at risk for going to landfill and not being recycled. Another reason is the ever-growing complexity of modern objects, for example, cell phones. Yes, this is made out of metal, but it's made out of a lot of different kinds of metal, and a lot of other composites and stuff like that that go into making this, and computers and TVs, and even things like doorknobs and zippers. It's all just so complicated that a lot of metal in creation and in the waste stream really can't be recycled because it's a lot of mixed materials. And we explored that in this video right here, 100 things that you surprisingly cannot recycle. So if you didn't know about some of the stuff that I'm talking about, definitely check out that video up there. I'll also leave it linked down below. It's very eye-opening, all of the things that we actually cannot put in our curbside recycling. Cell phones, for example, contain over 40 different elements, which makes extraction incredibly hard. Other mixed materials like hand pump soap dispensers, toothpaste tubes, and more fall into this category. Though when it is just one or two other materials mixed with the cans, it can be possible. For example, a paper label or a plastic sticker on a metal can is very easily for them to remove at the factory, and that can will most likely be recycled. Another reason that more cans are not recycled, and this is the same reason across the board for all recycling, is lack of consumer education. Education when it comes to what people actually can and cannot recycle. Again, definitely check out that video that I made a couple weeks ago, and please learn to recycle properly. Definitely call your facility, see what they can and cannot take, because some facilities might be willing to take technology, some might not be. Some might only take aluminum and tin, some might not take steel. Whatever the case may be, definitely call your facility and see what your other options might be. It might be that you just have to collect all of your steel cans in a bag and then drive a couple hours to drop it off at a recycling facility. So consumers being unaware of how to properly recycle and also being unaware of what they can, pun intended, recycle. That's so cheesy that even I hated it. So not only is it being aware of what you cannot put in your recycling bin, it's also being aware of what you can put in your recycling bin. Because there might be some surprising things that your city might take. If you want, there's an interactive map I'll leave linked down below for you to check out recycling in your city. This map helps you find metal recycling laws in your area and can help you even set up a recycling program if your area doesn't already have one. The last issue when it comes to metal recycling is alloys and composites. And that is when you combine different types and different amounts of metals. So in theory, they really can be recycled. It just gets really complicated. And it is just very difficult when it gets to that point because they are mixed materials and made out of different metals. So as we've learned throughout this series of where does our waste go, we've learned that metal actually is probably the best material. The most important difference between glass and plastic and metal is that it's actually more beneficial to recycle metal than it is to extract new metals to turn into new products. Like I already mentioned here and in those other two videos in this series, that it is actually cheaper to just make new plastic and new glass than it is to recycle them, which is what's so wrong with the recycling system over here and what makes the metal recycling system over here so great. In fact, aluminum is so profitable that some companies even give money to the consumers when they bring their metal back. I know this is a thing in a lot of European countries, and there's even a few US states that do this, but it's very rare in the US, honestly. And it actually, no, it's a thing here in Japan too. That's something that you might not know. Learn and see if your state, your city, your area has a metal take-back program, and you might even get a few cents per can, and then you can get paid to recycle. If that's not an incentive to recycle more, I don't know what is. And finally, let's talk about some things that we can do as consumers to help the recycling process continue to improve. First and foremost, as I always say, please clean out your recycling before you put it in your bin or your bag. I cannot stress this enough. This is seriously so important when it comes to the recycling process, especially as a consumer. Of course, things should be done with corporations, with recycling facilities, and things like that, but the number one thing that we can do as consumers here, other than consume less, is to recycle properly. Make sure all of your recycling is clean. Dirty items end up in the landfill, and if they don't make it all the way to the landfill, chances are they're gonna end up in a stream, a river, and eventually the ocean. Another important thing that you can do is to see if your facility requires you to sort your metal. Like I said, there's a lot of common household metals, particularly aluminum, tin, and steel. So see if your facility requires you to sort it. So if your facility requires you to sort it and you haven't been this whole time, it might have just been going to landfill. So if you want to prevent more metal from going to the landfill, definitely see if you should be sorting yours. You can do this by simply calling or emailing your facility and just asking about their rules. Number 3, please do not put good resources in the trash. Genius, I know. But especially now that we know how important metal recycling is, Not a single piece of metal should be going into the trash. Most plastic and glass is gonna end up in the landfill anyways. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't at least try, right? This goes for all types of materials, not just metal. Recycle what you can. If you don't have a bin but your city offers recycling program, ask them for a bin. If your school or your work office or anything like that doesn't have a recycling program, try to start one yourself, even if it is just cans, because metal is such a precious resource, and because the recycling system is so valuable, it is really important that we recycle as much metal as possible. And of course, another very important thing that we can do as consumers is to reduce our consumption of single-use items. Even if it is metal, even if the chance of it being recycled is super high, it's just really important to reduce our consumption in the first place. And I'm right there with you when it comes to cans, because we don't really have an option to get dried beans here, so I have to get all of my beans and corn and peas in cans. Thankfully it is cans and not something like plastic. I still use a lot of single-use metal too. So I'm not just gonna give up eating beans because it's a staple in my diet, just because I wanna consume less. Reduce what you actually can. So for example, if you drink 3 cans of soda a day, try to cut it down to 2 cans of soda a day. One last thing I wanted to add is that I was unable to find where our metal is actually recycled in the US. I will definitely do some more research, and if I find any sources, I will leave them linked down below. But as of now, any resource that I found was really just focused on plastic and glass recycling, because that is the bulk of the recycling that we used to send to China just 2 years ago. So there's not much information on the metal recycling system in the US in the first place, let alone where it's actually being recycled. If I were to make an educated guess, I would say that the US is actually handling their own metal recycling just because it's so profitable. The reason that we still send a lot of our waste overseas is because it is more profitable to just dump it on someone else's land than it is for us to actually recycle it properly ourselves. That is all I have today to say about metal. I hope that you learned something valuable from this video. If you did learn something and you think it would benefit others too, I would really appreciate that you share this video with others. And if you like this video, of course, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really does help support this channel and the message of this video. Again, I'll leave all my resources I used to do this research linked down below, as well as some more great resources I have on my channel to help you better recycle, learn about your waste, learn about where your waste goes, and things like that. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to spend some time with me and learn some more about recycling. I know it's not the most fun topic, but I'm glad that you joined me today. If you're new here and you like all things about zero waste, whether it's about recycling, starting a garden, starting a compost, all sorts of things like that, definitely be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay tuned. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, remember that these small changes you make have a big impact in the long run. Bye guys. At the very minimum, it can take just 6 weeks for your metal from go. Yikes. I don't think I like that, whatever. Oh my gosh, I thought it was much more than that. And it boils down to a few reasons. Of course, contamination, right? And that can will probably still be, but there is still some good news with glass. We're talking about cans here. What was I even trying to say? What in the world? I don't even know. Things that we can do as consumers to help the recycling process. It is very important that we recycle all metal as possible, as much metal. And another thing that we can do as consumers is to just reduce our consumption, as well as some more great resources.